We're going to be talking Nuremberg tonight, and we'll get the music started. We'll let everybody in. Thank you all for being here and being a part of the program. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Greatest Generation Live for Thursday, June 11th. My name is Sean Hall. I'm the Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. It's great to see you all here this evening. We had some big storms roll through Pittsburgh here in the last couple of hours, but it took away all that horrible humidity that we had, so it's turning into quite a nice evening. We're going to be on tonight talking about the Nuremberg trials with Glenn Flickinger. Glenn, how are you doing?
Doing excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. It's great to see you all here again for the conversation tonight. I'm going to get myself out of the way, but I want to give some updates on what we have going on with VBC. This is our current spring issue. This is a free quarterly magazine that we send out to about 8,000 households. We would love to send it out to you if you do not receive it. It's just simply because we don't have your address. So please send that to me. And we'd love to get you out a copy so that you can read up on the 250th birthday of America. We put a lot of stories in this issue from the Revolutionary War. Revolutionary War veterans stories are in this one, and it's quite a good read. So get your copy while you can before they are quote unquote sold out. We have programs coming up in the next couple of weeks. Here we will be looking at Father's Day. We are having retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling join us. He's been seen a lot on the news. A long military career. He wrote a book, If I Don't Return, based on the journals that he wrote while he was deployed during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. As you can tell from the title, he wanted this to be for his sons. I'm very interested. I'm going to be hosting this program on Monday night with Mark, and excited to dive into the ideas of fatherhood and being a mentor and what it means to be deployed as a dad. So for those of you in the room who were a dad or became a dad while you're deployed, please check in on this program because I'd love to hear your thoughts as we get through the conversation honoring Father's Day on Monday. We will be in Swickley at Christ Church Grove Farm on June 17th for a breakfast. It's always really well attended. We kind of stuff ourselves into that barn, but we have a great time, hear some amazing stories. And we'll be back here Thursday night for Auschwitz survivor David Wisnia. Am I pronouncing that right, Glenn?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, with Doug Survey. Do you want to give us a preview of that program?
Well, I think Doug is on the on the program. If we could unmute him.
I do see Doug. Doug, I'll ask you to unmute.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, just
we caught you right in the middle of a bite.
No problem.
Hey, Doug, good to see you. Thank you for joining tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
The audience might remember Doug from 4 or 5 weeks ago. Doug is a professor out in New Jersey and has done a lot of teaching, a lot of education on the Holocaust. If you remember 5, 6 weeks ago, Doug did a program, an excellent program for us on sort of the basic history of the Holocaust, right? We've done a lot of Holocaust programs that are stories about Holocaust victims, Holocaust survivors, etc. But he did a great job of just sort of laying the history out there for us. So Doug, thanks so very much for doing that. And now you did so good then, Doug. We're having you back. And
no pressure.
No pressure. Doug.
This is as you probably have with the book. David's story is just an incredible story. His grandson's also going to be on with me, who's a professional musician, pretty much like his grandfather. But the real quick story, to give you a little bit of insight, he became an orphan at 16 when his family was killed. He was then captured by the SS, brought to Auschwitz for 2.5 years, did the death march, got on a train to Dachau that he had no choice of going on, realizes that he can't survive at Dachau, volunteers to work at an airplane factory in Austria, and then escapes off a train, joins 101st Airborne, fights with them to the end of the war. His family has been killed, so as a result of that, He decides to come to the United States, where he has two aunts in Brooklyn and the Bronx, and everything, the rest is history. I was fortunate to meet him in 1996, and he passed away 3 years ago.
It's a great story. There's a very good documentary about it that we're going to be showing, I guess, a couple of clips from, Doug. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah. It's a little too long to play as to screen it as we sometimes do on our programs. But yeah, this will be another fascinating look into a Holocaust survivor's life next week.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Doug. Looking forward to that conversation next Thursday. And all of these programs, you could check out everything that we have coming up in the next month on our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org. Check on online programs, which we'll be doing Monday nights for our VBC Live, Thursday nights for Greatest Generation Live. And then if you're in the Pittsburgh region and you'd like to join us for a breakfast, you can check in-person breakfasts. We also have our ongoing Veterans History Project. Please reach out to me if you'd love to sit down one-on-one with me or with a veteran, just to sit down and tell your story. We'd love to get that recorded before they are lost or forgotten. A lot of this and everything that we do is provided for free and is made possible by your generous support. You can become a supporting member for $50 a year by also going to veteransbreakfastclub.org or giving anything that you would like. It helps us to keep these programs running week in and week out, and we sure do appreciate all of you being here and for your continued support. Glenn, I think we have a World War II vet in the room. It's under Samsung SM.
That is Dick Inlow. Let's unmute Dick.
Dick, I'll ask you to unmute. There we go, Dick. You should be
There. I want to greet you. Happy to be here and watch the program tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, Dick. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Those of you who don't remember the program we did with Dick 6 weeks ago, Dick was a Navy Seabee during World War II and was at the invasion of Peleliu in 1944. Okay. Thank you, Dick. Even I get these dates mixed up. And I need to depend on my 100-plus-year-old World War II veterans to keep me straight on the dates.
We'll do that.
Okay. Thank you for joining, Dick.
Thank you for letting me.
Okay. Okay. We ready to get started here, Sean?
Take it away.
Okay. So this program is a continuation of one of the themes that we wanted to work on this year, and that was the Nuremberg trials and the Holocaust, the two obviously connected at the hip. We started, for all the years I've been doing this, every year have had a couple of three Holocaust stories on, okay? But I thought this year we would dig into the actual history of it. And if you remember, probably 3 months ago now, we started off with the lawyer John Q. Barrett from New York City, who is a Holocaust expert and really a Nuremberg expert. Really probably the most well-known biographer of Justice William Jack. Do I have that right? William Jackson?
Robert Jackson.
Robert Jackson. Thank you, Harry. Robert Jackson. And so we did a program just on the Nuremberg trial. Not all the trials, just the first trial, the sort of big show trial with Goering and the various leading Nazi party officials, Nazi military figures, etc. So that's where we started this discussion of the history of the Nuremberg trials. We then sort of mixed that in with Doug's backgrounder, if you will, on the history of the Holocaust itself. And then we actually had this Judgment at Nuremberg program scheduled for just about that same time. And unfortunately, our guest, Dr. Harry Kantrovich, decided to have a car accident a couple days before the program. But he survived and is looking very well. Harry, thank you for being on.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Okay. And before we get started on the judgment, and this, when we're talking Judgment at Nuremberg, we're mostly talking about the movie Judgment at Nuremberg. There's some other aspects that we'll pull into this, but I'm sure all of you have seen. Well, let's do a little poll. I know it's not easy on Zoom. Show of hands this way. Okay. How many of you have seen the movie Judgment at Nuremberg? I see a lot of hands waving.
Yeah, several.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It is, in my estimation. Well, I'll save that for later. I'll save that for later. Okay. So Harry, as I like to start out our programs, tell us a little bit about yourself. I, I noticed earlier that it is Dr. Harry Kantrovich, and I asked Dr. Harry Kantrovich if he could fix my hip for me, but unfortunately, he's not that kind of doctor.
Yep. Doctor of Education, got it in the Navy, actually finished up in the middle of Desert Storm firing Tomahawks. So I was able to finish up my core courses and then went out when we pulled back into port and finished up out in California getting the degree.
How long were you in the Navy, Harry?
23 years.
And
Retired out as a master chief.
firing tomahawks the whole time, or what else did you do?
I was a gunner's mate to start, and then I was a command master chief, retired out as the deputy to the master chief of the Navy.
Wow, interesting. I didn't, yeah.
Got out, bummed around for a while, was doing defense contracting. I still do some consulting for a company, but got back into theater as an actor. So I was in Judgment at Nuremberg. It was one of the plays I was in. Then during COVID, my daughter kicked me in the rear end and said, "You need to start doing some writing." So going with the Holocaust, back to the Holocaust theme, my first play, I got permission from the Landsman estate and took the 9.5-hour documentary of Shoah and turned that into a 2.5-hour play. Then I worked next with Tom Brokaw on The Greatest Generation Speaks, and with Doc Norton, Bruce Norton, who's been on the program.
Right.
We wrote Voices from Vietnam together, and then we just finished up with Saving Lives, which was on the medical teams from the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So we just finished that world premiere on that.
Harry, that's quite a resume of activity. You're kind of a Renaissance man from my point of view.
Hey, I'll take it.
Okay. So when did you and why did you become so interested in the Nuremberg trials and specifically this particular trial?
The Nuremberg trials were really because of the relatives that I had that went through the Holocaust. Some of them that survived the Holocaust had friends that were actually on trial or witnesses during the trial. So I remember watching the movie for the first time with Spencer Tracy and team with my dad and my great aunt and great uncle who both survived the Holocaust. And they were pointing out some of the witnesses that, well, this is who this was, and this is who this was. And it just gathered more and more interest for me. And of course, started reading the history on it with the main trial, and then going through and just realizing how many trials that they actually had.
Yeah. And people,
so I kind of became a student of it.
and a very, very well, very deeply educated one, I can tell the audience from our discussions. And just to remind people, which we did when we had John Q. Barrett on, the trial that everybody remembers, to the extent anybody remembers it anymore, was the original trial, what I call the show trial, if you will, of the leading Nazi figures. But that was just the first trial of how many trials, Harry, that then occurred?
Oh, geez, 16 trials total, I believe.
Yeah. And as time went on, those trials and the Cold War developed, those trials kind of got less and less publicity, were less and less followed by the general public. So the trial we're going to talk about tonight, which is which the Judgment at Nuremberg movie and play are based on, was which trial, Harry?
This is the justice trial.
Yeah.
So again, here 16 officials were tried. It lasted for 11 months. And these were the prosecutors, the judges from the Third Reich, and senior justice officials.
Right.
So as I said, the trial lasted for 11 months, 16 defendants. Out of the 16, one committed suicide. There was one mistrial due to an illness, 4 acquittals, and 10 were sentenced.
Yeah. It was the third trial of the series of trials, and known as the lawyer's trial or the judge's trial, right?
Yes.
And this man was sort of the number one defendant. Is that right?
That's correct. For those that are familiar with the movie, he was the actual Nazi minister of justice.
Yeah.
So Burt Lancaster would have portrayed this gentleman as Ernst Janning in the movie.
Now, what's fascinating, and you just went through this, but there were 16 German defendants, and I think you said 10 were found were guilty and
Yes.
given prison sentences. This one, the sort of number one defendant, if you will, found guilty and released just 2 years later, and
Yes.
as were most of the other defendants.
And a lot of that was because of what was happening with the Cold War. And it was very unpopular at the time with both the Americans, the entire ally families, as you will, the populations, as well as, of course, with the German population.
Let's talk about the history of the actual history before we get into the movie. So this was the presiding judge, at least the original one. It changed after a while due to this man's illness. Carrington Tanner Marshall. Looks like a man stepping out of the 1880s rather than the 1940s. What happened to Justice Marshall?
Well, 1947, he fell pretty ill and ended up having to step down. He was that bad. He was replaced by James Brand as the presiding judge. Both of these men were represented by Thomas Haywood or Spencer Tracy, again, for those with the movie.
Yeah. And then the name Telford Taylor, for those who have followed or read much about the Nuremberg trials, is one of the major names of all the trials. What was his role?
Telford Taylor was he was a lawyer and a professor, but he was also an intelligence officer, retired out of the Army as a brigadier general. But he was the lead counsel. And again, as I stated, Army intel officer, very outspoken in his criticism of U.S. actions during the Vietnam War, which was very well publicized throughout the major newspapers and news organizations.
And
It came as a surprise. So he was, again, outspoken on the war itself, but in how the war was being prosecuted over in Vietnam.
But back to the Nuremberg trials. So Robert Jackson, of course, was the chief prosecutor.
Right. And when he left, Telford Taylor took over the remaining trials as the chief prosecutor.
And Jackson left after that first big show trial.
Correct.
Telford Taylor then runs the show for the rest of the duration of the trials.
Exactly.
And he has a series of books about the trials that are deeply done very in depth, right? If you want to read in depth about the Nuremberg trials, how many books does he have out there? Several.
I think he's got 5 books.
Yeah.
On the various trials, and you might as well consider you're going to be reading a legal a legal book.
Yeah. I actually picked one of those up or had ordered one from the library. I didn't want to buy them because they're expensive online. And I spent about a day with it and decided, nah, not even me, who loves to read, am going to spend probably a month reading just the first volume, much less.
Yep.
But if you want a historical record of the Nuremberg trials, it's his books that I would imagine scholars go to.
Definitely. I wish I would have had it next to me. I've got a bunch of books, and I've got a couple of his.
So what were these judges indicted for?
It was crimes of humanity was the biggest. I would say probably the biggest indictment or the largest indictment that we'd see out there. There were others that were enabling Nazi atrocities, or just being an enabler, sterilization, allowing sterilization. So there was, again, which would have fallen under crimes of humanity. Most of them had more than one indictment against them.
Yeah. And Harry, I may be asking this unfairly of you because it just occurred to me as a question. Before the Nazis came to power, how would we describe the German judiciary system? Pretty much just like most of the European system?
Right. I mean, it was set up there. It was a democratic process. They had no dictatorship really to, order them how they were going to do things. In this sense, when the Nazis took over, it became, follow the leader. In other words, you do what you're told to do and everything will be fine. You don't do what you're told to do, you're going to be shot.
Yeah. Do it our way or you're gone.
Gone. Exactly.
And not just gone to some retirement community in
yeah,
where you're gone from this earth. Yeah. Okay. And this is just again a resume of the trial that we kind of already covered. 10 found guilty, 4 received life sentences, all 4 released by 1957, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And this gets into what we're going to be talking a lot about. And that's, let me take the PowerPoint down for a minute. I see one hand up already if that's right. But the trials very quickly became very controversial, not only in the United States, but in Germany and in Europe in general, as the Cold War unfolded. Could you help explain that a little bit? Why? I mean, it just seems so obvious. These people murdered millions of people and harmed tens of millions more. Why wouldn't everybody have agreed that we want to hold them responsible for their crimes?
It wasn't really us that was against holding them responsible, or our allies, but the German people. And what do you try to do after a war is you help to rebuild. And part of that rebuilding process is rebuilding the confidence of the, in this case, the people of Germany. So you want to reinstill the confidence in them. You want to reinstill the that we're not blaming them for anything, but it was taken by the German people that if we're accusing these jurists, we're accusing them of these crimes. And it was the same way with the show trial, as you call it. As far as anybody was concerned over there, all these people were doing was following orders.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I saw in my military career is sometimes when people were brought to non-judicial punishment or a courts martial, was the biggest offense was all they were doing was following orders.
And the other element would be the impact of the Cold War and the need to pull,
definitely,
at that point, West Germany into the fold to help, with the Cold War. And even our own country, from a political and military aspect, needed to promote the Germans, not defeat them again. Yeah.
Right. And what we're going to see as we go through this is, the moral questions that Abby Mann was trying to instill.
Yeah.
He wanted his audiences to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And using these moral questions as the thought process.
Yeah. Are there any questions up to this point? Because next we're going to get into a little bit of background on Abby Mann. I see one hand up, but I'm thinking
Justin Miller. Looks like Justin may have dozed off.
Yeah.
But there are two in the chat here.
Okay.
Al Smith, whatever happened to the German senior and junior military officers after the war? Were they charged with a crime or just released back to Germany?
The ones that were charged with crimes, there were some like Eichmann that were hunted down by the Elie Wiesels and everyone. The junior soldiers, sailors, etc., were returned back to Germany. The senior officers, depending on what they could find, if there were crimes, they were held off into the other trials.
Yeah. So just to be clear, there were the Nuremberg trials, which were sort of the official trials of the Nazi war criminals, but there were also many other trials. The Nuremberg trials, maybe the best way to think about it is the full name, which I can't think of right now.
Tribunals.
The tribunal. Well, it was the international agreement to try these people.
Right. It was well known as the Nuremberg Military Tribunal.
There we go. And it was based on a charter, if you go back to the program we did with John Barrett, that was agreed to in London in 1945 or so, or 46 maybe. But there were a whole series of other war crime trials that took place in military tribunals that were in France, in Germany, in Russia for sure, to the extent they had any real trials, right? So the war crimes that the junior officers, Al, were accused of, many of them were tried in separate trials from the Nuremberg trials. That making sense to everybody? Okay. Sean, was there another question in the chat?
Monique says, who was the author that wrote the detailed books on Nuremberg that you mentioned, Glenn? Was that Brigadier General Telford Taylor? Telford Taylor.
Brigadier General Telford Taylor, right? After I had that little incident of going to the library and picking up Telford's first volume and realizing I don't have the time to read this, I went and picked up, I did some research, and I picked up a book by Josef Persico. Am I pronouncing that one right?
Right.
Also called, I believe, Judgment at Nuremberg. I have it right over here. I could go get it. But Josef Persico, who is an excellent writer and wrote an excellent history of the Nuremberg trials that is highly readable. very readable. So if you want to read about the Nuremberg trials, but don't want to dig in, if you just want to go a foot deep rather than 20 feet deep, I'd highly recommend Joseph Persico's book.
And a couple more questions came in.
Yep.
Scott Masters, what about the Jim Crow courts in many of the U.S. states at the time? Was that contradiction pointed out or / considered?
Harry?
I don't ever remember that being brought up in any of the trials.
Yeah.
And if anybody would have brought something like that up, it would have been, I want to say Rolf, but Herman Orth is who Rolf, that was the actual person. And he was the defense attorney for Altstoetter or Janning in the movie, and was definitely very outspoken and was not afraid to bring up the anything that could match itself, or all they're doing is following orders, or this should be taken a look at. The Americans have done this, the Germans did this, the Americans did this. So that would have been something he would have brought up, and I don't ever remember it being brought up in the justice trial, or he was actually part of the show trial as well.
But what was brought up in that first trial was fascinating. Among other things, was the German naval commander, help me, Harry, Donitz.
Donitz, yeah, Karl Donitz.
Karl Donitz brought up his defender, his counsel brought up, because the German submariners were accused of war crimes, of shooting sailors in the water after they had sunk a ship. So they brought up this point that, well, look, the U.S. Navy did exactly the same thing in the Pacific. And in fact, Admiral Nimitz, was it Nimitz? Yes, I think it was Admiral Nimitz, then, was contacted, and he was, what's the legal term? Not debriefed, but he was, he made a statement. And that statement was, yeah, that's right, we did. And there were orders given by the submarine commander to go ahead and shoot German submariners in the water after they had sunk,
the U-boats, yep.
The U-boats, or even German warships.
Right.
And because of that, Donitz was left with he wasn't acquitted, but his sentence was, I think,
commuted.
There you go, commuted. So
one of the other implications that was brought up during this trial, as a moral implication, if we're taking a look at it, was the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, using the A-bomb. So I saw a question pop up on the chat about Joachim Pieper, and if he was part of one of these trials, which he was convicted and sentenced to death.
But not the Nuremberg trials. That was
this was one of the other military.
Yeah. If you remember, about a month, maybe now, 5 weeks ago, we also did the Tokyo war crimes trial with Professor. I'm going to look for his name. What is it? Gary Bass, which was fascinating because that was a very different affair than the Nuremberg trials, but the Japanese defendants brought up Hiroshima, Nagasaki, all sorts of the bombings in general.
Yep.
So, these moral questions, and we need to jump into those now, are very complicated,
yeah,
to say the least. And much of the answer that you give depends on your kind of point of view.
Yep.
It's not as straightforward as one might think. So let's move on a little bit here, else we're not going to get to everything we want to. So we want to spend just a few minutes on this man, Abbey Mann.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about him, Harry.
Well, homegrown boy from up your way.
East Pittsburgh, yes.
Yep. Of course, the writer of Judgment at Nuremberg, the play, and the movie. Also, Kojak, for anybody that remembers our lollipop Telly Savalas as Kojak. Abby Mann was the writer for that. Wrote a lot of TV dramas in the 50s. Playhouse 90 he did a lot of writing for Playhouse 90, and actually Judgment at Nuremberg was a Playhouse 90 production. Academy Award winner. And with Playhouse 90, Maximilian Schell, as he did with the movie, was the defense attorney in this. And if you remember Playhouse 90, it was actually done as a play.
Yeah.
I
don't remember it live. I'm not that old, but I think I watched some repeats of it in the 60s and 70s.
70s, yep.
Yeah. And the key is that this was done by Abby Mann in 1959.
Right. And then the movie came out in 61.
And in part, maybe almost in whole, the movie, here's the poster for it, came about because of the Playhouse drama that was aired.
Right.
And the man who played the key role in developing it into a movie we'll skip that one. Whoops. Oh, what happened to there he is. I'm sorry. I'll come back to that last slide. Was one Stanley Kramer. And how did that do? Is there a story behind that, Harry?
Kramer was another one that lost family members within the Holocaust. According to Abby Mann's stepson, they did not know each other. They knew of each other. Of course, Kramer was the Hollywood darling as a producer and a director. He knew of Abby Mann from what he had done with Playhouse 90 and the production. So they ended up meeting, I guess, at a cocktail party, according to his stepson. And this kind of got developed, or the movie kind of got developed on a napkin. So,
yeah. And what's interesting here to me, and I'll go back now to these moral questions. So I can imagine, and I guess this isn't historical, but I can imagine Abby Mann growing into the discussion that he wanted to have about the Holocaust, right?
yes.
And the play started his thinking about it, and then it became sharper and more defined, if you will, in the movie, right? And Harry was in touch with Abby Mann's it's his grandson, it's his stepson, and stepson wasn't able to be on tonight. We had hoped he would, but these were what Abby Mann thought of as the fundamental moral questions to be discussed in the play and then in the movie. Any thoughts here, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at these, and so the individual versus the collective responsibility basically comes down to, can the individuals be held accountable for the actions of their government or their state? So the trial of Yanning is what's central to this one, as he's accused of enabling the Nazi atrocities. So is it him enabling the atrocities, or is it the actions of the government of the state saying you will or you shall? This is how you will govern. This is how you will adjudicate.
Yeah.
For the obedience to authority, can obedience to authority justify one's actions is where that is. And that comes back again, looking at the movie with Rolf, or the defense attorney, arguing that the defendants were only following the orders from Hitler. So it'd be saying right now that if our commander in chief gives a direct order, should it be followed?
Yeah.
If that direct order is considered a lawful order.
Yeah.
Well, Nazi Germany, if the order came down from the Fuhrer, it was a lawful order. Where we go to justice and accountability, should the defendants be held fully responsible for their actions? And again, it comes down to questioning the moral implications. And this is where it comes to the Allies' actions, like the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If they wanted to bring out the Jim Crow, this would have been the place to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the role of the judiciary, examining that role and upholding justice and the consequences of failing to do so. So this is where Haywood or Carrington Marshall or James Brand grappling with the moral dilemmas of delivering a verdict with amidst the Cold War political pressures that are coming down on them, as well as everyone else within from our allies. It's those Cold War implications. And of course, who do you also have sitting on the judiciary as one of the justices is a Russian.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, there's a Russian on this trial or on the original trial?
On all the trials, there was a Russian.
All of them. Okay. Yeah. And so you have to ask some questions about, and in fact, that came up during the original trial. I should stop calling it a show trial. Makes me sound like a Russian or a Soviet anyway. And that was the massacre at Katynin. Do I have that name?
Yes.
Yeah, in Poland in the early days of the war. And the Russians wanted to bring it up and did bring it up because they had the right to do so. And the Americans, the French, and who else? The Brits were like, wait a second, you're going to bring that up? You're the ones who did it. And of course, they denied doing it, where there was incredible amount of evidence that, in fact, they were guilty of it. So again, these moral questions, it depends on your point of view sometimes.
It really does.
Yeah. So now we're going to get into the movie itself. Help me see if there's and let me look in the chat. And are there questions from the audience before we get into the movie itself? I'm going to go to my gallery view. Do I see any hands up electronically or?
I don't see any hands up, but I see Al Smith put something. How factual was the movie and with regard to the actual depiction of the personality of each defendant? The script sticking to the actual words of the prosecutor and defendants.
Al, let me ask you to hold off on that until we get into the discussion of the movie, because that's exactly where we're going to go next. Okay. What I do, if there's no questions from here on, Harry, what I'd like you to talk about is that these moral questions that we just discussed, and the play and the movie that Abby Mann then makes with Stanley Kramer, their reflection, not just of this one trial, the justice's trial, their reflection of all of the trials. They apply to all of the trials.
Right.
It's a little bit like this movie Pressure that came out, which I dissed so thoroughly, right? Great entertainment, but terrible history, right?
Right.
The problem with movie producers is if you actually go in and tell the real story, it's boring as all get out. There's often no romance, there's often no direct conflict, et cetera, et cetera. So they got to make it up, right? In this case, Harry, in your opinion, does the movie reflect the reality of what happened?
Yes.
It does.
And one of the statements that I've seen from critics of the movie, from the play, from historians that have come back, that the movie and the play are very good mimics of the actual trial.
Okay. But it is, but to be clear, unlike say Pressure, if everybody's people who saw that, in Pressure, the characters that were shown were the actual characters: Eisenhower, Montgomery, Kay Summersby, Stagg, of course, etc.
Right.
In this movie, or in this movie, Kramer and Mann have fictionalized the characters.
The characters are based on the real characters, with
Right.
the exception of one that is fictionalized completely, and that is Frau Berthold.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about her. Okay, so why do you think he did it that way? Why wouldn't he just have said that's Josef Altstoetter or wherever that was, and use the real names and the real characters?
It was more for, I think, with Mann, and just from the way I've heard his stepson talk about him, it was more to protect the families
Hmm.
of the folks that were being portrayed, vice for entertainment purposes. Again, the only thing that he wanted to, and he really kind of fought against it, was the love connection with Haywood and Berthold.
Yeah.
But he got the Hollywood pressure to put that love connection in there.
And it did introduce, for those of you who have seen it recently, did introduce another dimension of telling the story of the trials and the Holocaust that would not have been present at all had he just stuck to 100% the
Right, based on the trial.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And it wasn't just the Holocaust, but it was the war in general. Because Berthold's husband, who was, if you remember, a German general that was executed because of his leadership in the culpability in the Malmedy massacre.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which again was that person's name was fictionalized, but there was a German general, not Pfeiffer, not Joseph Pfeiffer,
No,
but
this
someone
right.
above him that was, yeah, prosecuted as part of the Malmedy trial.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions before we jump into the movie itself? Anything in the chat, Sean?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Let me go back to, I really wish we could show clips of the movie, right, from YouTube. But as you know, we have a big problem with that. With YouTube. We can't just rip them off, if you will, even though we're a nonprofit, right? We can't just show those clips without getting into trouble with YouTube. So that reduces us to having to show stills. Okay. So I kind of looked at these two men, Harry. Hopefully you agree, because I made this slide up after we talked. Hopefully I spelled antagonist right. Did I get that right? It looks right.
Yep, it looks right.
The two primary antagonists of the movie. At least I think my own opinion would be that when the two of them went head to head, that was the most fascinating part, among the most fascinating parts of the movie. So
I'm 100% with you.
give us a little background on the roles these two men played.
So Maximilian Schell as Rolf, or Herman Orth, who was the actual defense for Altstoetter, and Richard Widmark portrayed Colonel Lawson. In actuality, Telford Taylor.
Yeah.
In this. And according to Telford Taylor and some of his writings, what you saw portrayed with the head-to-heads in these, and particularly in this scene right there, is really where it kind of went. You know, that's really where the explosions started. Taylor and Orth always were going head to head.
Yeah.
It was, one of them was up there. The other one had no fear of interrupting without objecting, just totally interrupting on the section there. So it's they did a great job with the portrayal on this thing. And I think Telford Taylor helped a lot, you know, as the movie was coming in, as a you know, someone that was an advisor there.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, when I rewatched this movie a month or so ago, when you were originally going to be on, Harry, Maximilian Schell's performance was over the top good.
Yes.
I mean, you know, believable. You would have thought he had been a Nazi himself and believed all this stuff, I'll say politely, that he was saying. It was so riveting. Occasionally I thought he's mimicking Hitler or Goebbels or, you know, one of the leading Nazis.
He was passionate.
Yeah.
To the point where, I mean, he believed what he was doing, even if it was wrong. He had to believe it was right, and he portrayed it that way.
I mean, to me, it seemed a little bit like, you know, my wife and I really love murder mysteries, you know, and detective stories, sort of things, especially the British ones. I think they do it the best. Sort of like the ghost of Agatha Christie is out there in Britain, but you know, it's the role of a counsel, the defendant's counsel, to defend that person, even if they might know that they are guilty of the murder, you know, that they're still going to come up with every possible defense they can come up with and be passionate about it, you know. I don't know if I could ever do anything like that. And that's kind of how Hans Rolf plays this, or Schell plays this role, where you know, he seems like he puts aside his real, maybe inner true core beliefs about humanity and still defends these Nazi judges as best he can.
Yep,
And
definitely. I mean, it's just, you have to, as a defense attorney.
Yeah.
You know, your client, I mean, that goes on today too. Your client may be guilty of sin, but your job is to defend them and get them off if at all possible, or at least with the lightest sentence. And that's what he was doing.
You know, we saw that in our discussion about the Tokyo war crime trials, where about half the counsels for defense were American lawyers. And, you know, they got up there and defended Tojo and all the other Japanese leaders just as passionately as if they had been, you know, Americans.
Right.
I suppose that you got to have that to make the legal system work.
You do.
Here's just an incredible, if you see the movie again, this performance can make you cry.
Montgomery Clift was, I mean, fantastic as Pedersen. I've got a little bit of passion towards that role. That's the role I played when I was acting in the play. Taking a look at it, I wanted it. It's one of the smallest roles in the play, if you will, but I think it's probably one of the hardest ones to portray. And he did an absolutely outstanding. I do every time I see it. I want to cry. I felt like this, like he was sterilized, and
And in fact, I mean, the real man, well, Rudolf Pedersen, he in fact was sterilized, right?
yes,
Yeah, by the Nazi doctors
right.
because the belief was he was mentally incompetent.
And that's what they would do with the mentally incompetent, the disabled. They would sterilize them.
Yeah. And another, just I mean, this movie, just roll after roll after roll is. I couldn't stop using the word riveting. I
Right.
should have looked up.
This one, it's based on an actual person, Irene Seiler, who was falsely convicted of perjury in. This is called the Nazi Party show trial, the Katzenberg case. And trying to take a look at my notes down here. Yep, she was convicted by Nazi judges less than a decade earlier. Seiler was accused of having a sexual affair with Leo Katzenberger, which violated racial laws. Katzenberger was a Christian. Seiler, or Hoffman in this case, was Jewish. Katzenberger in the trial here was named Feldenstein in the movie.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have this wrong in my note here. It's Irene Hoffman who was Jewish. The man
Right.
was Christian. I apologize for that. I got that backwards. Yeah. However, doesn't take away from the performance by Judy Garland.
No.
As I recall in the movie, Telford Taylor identifies her as someone he wants to have come and testify. She's remarried, living a more normal life in Berlin, I think.
Yep.
And, it was hard to convince her to come. Her new husband didn't want her to come, but in fact she does. And it's a damning evidence of the Nazi judges.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Now here's the man, the Birdman from Alcatraz, another great movie.
Yep, definitely. So again, you got it down there with Josef Altstoetter, who was the character that Janning was based on. He was the chief judge of Germany, the Nazi Party, and just again an amazing portrayal. And his monologue through the movie, the play. When I directed the play, I had an actual judge that was portraying him, and he walked away with like 6 awards from what we have in the Washington area here, Washington metro area. We have our what they call Watch Awards every year, and he walked away with 6 awards for his portrayal. But he said he had watched Lancaster for probably 14, 15 hours, just kept going back and forth over the role and what he did in that role. And I could swear if I closed my eyes, I mean, I could hear both of them. But this was just amazing, the way he portrayed it. And when he finally took responsibility for what he had done, that's when it really came to life. Within the movie, it really brought the movie to to a real state. And actually, that's what happened during the justice trial as well.
And Lancaster played this role where in the first, I don't know, half or so of the movie, he virtually says nothing.
Nothing.
You know, there's a couple of scenes with him and the other defendants in sort of the jail yard, if you will.
Yes.
They're given exercise where he does speak to them, right? But he virtually says nothing. And then this is not the climactic scene. Well, it might be the climactic scene in terms of the drama portrayed. What happened in this scene, Harry?
This is where he's taking the responsibility, and they were talking about, well, Rolf was up there just basically harassing a witness, and Janine steps up and says, pretty much enough is enough.
Yeah.
And I want to tell the truth. And Rolf was trying to stop him from going on and discussing what he was going to discuss. And he says, I want to tell the truth. And he takes the stand and he goes on for about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and just lets it all out and admits his guilt and the guilt of his other justices that were there.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of this actor. I wish now I had looked it up. But in terms of portraying a older Nazi judge,
Yeah.
sort of had the perfect face for it and the perfect demeanor for it.
He did.
He did. I mean, this scene in the movie, for those of you who haven't seen it in a while or never seen it, is, if you wanted to list the top 10 scenes in movies ever, this has got to be in the top 10. It just is explosive. The way Lancaster jumps up and, as Harry said, look, stop. This is enough. I've sat here for months being defended by this man, and now I'm going to tell the truth.
So that gentleman is Torben Meyer, is the actor.
This guy.
And he played Werner Lampe.
Yes. In Hogan's Heroes? No.
No. That's the role he played in the movie.
The other defendant, who I don't have a picture of, he was the camp commandant in Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
The real name doesn't matter, Harry, but that's right. I got that confused. I remember watching the movie again.
Werner Klemperer.
Yeah, Werner. Yeah.
And he played Emil Hahn.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's move on to the simmering love affair that goes on here. So how many top-notch stars can you have in one movie?
I don't know.
This has got to set the record.
I think so. Again, she is a fictionalized character. Again, Spencer Tracy as Haywood was portraying Carrington Marshall, and Marlene Dietrich was Frau Berthold. She was the widow of General Karl Berthold, who was tried and executed for the culpability in the Malmedy massacre.
Yeah.
And they met when he was staying at a house that belonged to her.
Yeah.
And her husband. And back during the trials, the Germans were removed from their homes, so the American and the Allied Tribunal could come in and take over the homes. And the servants actually played a huge role in this one, in a sense, as well.
Harry, is this where they try to bring out a sense of how the German people feel about these trials and felt
Yes,
about the aftermath of the war?
that was with hers, and it was like, we didn't know anything about what was going on in the camps. And then it was the Halberstadts in this, who were the housekeepers, the maid, the maid, the butler, chauffeur, etc.
Yeah.
And their son was a German soldier.
Yeah.
But again, we knew nothing about what was going on. We knew absolutely nothing. Nobody told us anything.
Yeah. And I recall in Joseph Persico's book, there was an aristocratic German woman whose house had survived. I think it was just in the northern suburbs of Nuremberg.
Nuremberg, right.
And she was kind of a socialite that
Yes.
invited all the various high-level American, Russian, French, British officials to her house, and they mixed together. And it was a way, it was a relief in a way from the trials that were happening. I'm talking about the original trial.
Yeah.
And this woman's husband, I'm sorry, this woman's sons had been killed on the Eastern Front, as I recall.
Yes.
So what did at this point, 1947, going into 48, what did the German people think of all this?
They were still, it was, they thought it was political, and that's all it was political. To make it's the winners holding their swords over the losers.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last picture I have from the movie is these were the three men who portrayed the three judges. There were actually more judges, I think, involved, right, Harry?
These were yes, there were more judges involved, but these were the three main characters.
And Spencer Tracy, kind of, as I recall, relative to the two judges to his side, always tried to be the not to make a pun out of this where he's sitting, but always tried to be the middleman. Always
Right.
tried to see the reality beyond just what was being presented in the courtroom.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a perfect role for Spencer Tracy. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So we just have a couple more slides about the subsequent play and the community play. But let me take the PowerPoint down for a bit. And Sean, are there questions in the chat or questions from the audience that anybody would like to pose?
Greg may have answered, but Jeffrey Foss asked, why did Rudolf Hess get such severe sentence at Nuremberg, a life sentence, when he had been in custody since his flight to England in May of 41? He had missed the final solution in all the extermination camps, etc.
I'm sorry, who asked that?
Jeffrey Foss.
Oh, hi, Jeff. Jeff, would you like to unmute and ask that question yourself?
Let's see if I can find Jeffrey. Hold on. There he is. I'll ask you to unmute, Jeffrey. There you go.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious how Rudolf Hess had got such a severe sentence. And like for the last 20 years of his life, he was the only prisoner in Spandau. And it just seemed like a little over the top when he had been in custody since May of 1941. Not defending him, but
Interesting question. And then, he committed suicide. I believe while he was in Spandau, or hung himself.
Hess did?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Very, very much near the end of his sentence, right?
Right.
So the way I would put it, Jeffrey, if again, I'm just going to tell you what Joe Persico said in his book, and it becomes very, very apparent. And we discussed this with John Bennett as well when we did the Judgment at Nuremberg program. Hess played a very, very coy uh, 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 role in his own defense, and I think to this day it's controversial whether it was real or acted, in that he pretended he was insane. I mean, in some way they were all insane, right? The leading Nazis, but he really even convinced Hermann Goring at times that he was insane.
Yeah.
Which was quite a thing to convince Goring of anything like that. So the feeling, I think, is that he got off lightly because of one. He did. Again, it's very controversial. He did make an attempt to try to change the course of the war in 1941, which might have been his first act of insanity. And then again, during the actual Nuremberg trial, the big trial, he off and on tried to claim he was insane. And the psychiatrists who were there, some were convinced he was, and some thought he was just acting at it. And the end result was he was not put to death. Does that help any, Jeff?
Yes.
And Carol Popchik, you're absolutely right. In the chat here, the line that stops the movie cold is Lancaster's, "Are we going to do this again?" When he pops up and starts talking, Rolf is I think haranguing Judy Garland as
Garland.
Hoffman.
Yep.
And that's when Yanning jumps up and says, "Look, we did this 10 years ago when we originally convicted this woman, and now we're doing it again." And that starts his climactic scene. Yeah. Other questions?
Scott asked, was any effort made as part of the judicial process to track down the Nazis who escaped or those who aided and abetted them?
When you say, maybe unmute Greg, but Nazis that escaped after the war we're talking about?
Yeah, it was Scott Masters. Scott?
Scott Masters. I'm sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I meant like in the very closing days of the war. So the ones who evaded trial by getting away, a lot of them were given help by significant organizations like the Catholic Church in some cases. And, that would open a real political issue.
The Catholic Church, was huge in sheltering them. They knew towards the end of the war, and there was a lot of them that left days or weeks before the Russians came in, and they headed to Rome, to the Vatican there. They headed to South America, where they were given province. So, I mean, it was, and as far as our troops or anyone there, nobody really gave the chase until the Elie Wiesels and really a lot of those from Israel were the ones that really started doing the manhunts.
Someone mentioned Simon
Wiesenthal. Yep.
That the Israelis chased these people down for decades, and I guess maybe in some cases still are, although we're running out of anybody that could possibly
left, right? Yeah, I think the most recent was 2 years ago.
Yeah, every once in a while I can remember in the past few decades, reading something about, some auto mechanic in Detroit who was found out to have been a Nazi guard at an infamous, concentration camp. Greg Yost, you have your hand up?
Yes. Glenn and I were discussing the possibility of doing a program on this type of thing. I'll sort of work backwards. The most recent cases of the war criminals usually involve camp guards who were 18 years old at the time or something like that. Interestingly enough, a lot of those are being prosecuted in Germany. They're considered to be criminals in Germany too. So it's not only the Israelis and the U.S. who are prosecuting them, but a lot of those people, of course, a lot of them have Alzheimer's, and they literally don't remember anything. They're not faking it. If you go farther back, there were the people who John Demjanok was the auto mechanic, I think, who you're talking about, and he was supposed to be a guard at Treblinka or Sobibor, or one of those two. But to go right after the end of the war, there were several categories of people who were escaping. One were scientists who was part of Operation Paperclip, and the U.S. wanted them. And the question becomes, how complicit were they in war crimes? Well, they might have supervised at factories where there was slave labor, but they weren't exactly camp guards at Auschwitz or anything. And then the others involved sort of pro-Nazi sympathizers, but also with the cooperation of U.S. and British intelligence. A lot of the people who escaped through the rat line were also people who knew a lot about Eastern Europe, and the U.S. and British knew very little. Who would cooperate with them against the Soviets, who had helped them when they were in Russia and in the Soviet Union, who had helped the Nazis, and maybe these same people would help out the U.S. and the British as the Cold War progressed. So it's very, very interesting as to what the motivations were and what the level of knowledge and cooperation was, and some ugly people. There's certainly the Croatian Catholic Church was very pro-Nazi. Right. And they set up the rat line. What was what was their name? The Ustazi. They gave a lot of fake IDs and used a lot of Catholic monasteries and everything to get people out into South America. So different angle on some things, but certainly part and parcel of the overall picture.
Harry, Doug Servey asked a great question. I got to be careful because of what I think of these things. But Harry, do you have any opinion of the movie Nuremberg that came out, I don't know, a few months ago, 4 or 5 months ago?
I was going to go see it, and I had a bunch of friends of mine that are historians, and they said, don't bother.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know whether I should have or not, just for my own curiosity. I probably should have. I may still try and find it someplace on Netflix or pick up the movie.
It's on
service. Yeah. But they just said it was very unrealistic. And, after you see the movie here, or actually there was a made for television movie on Nuremberg, and I cannot remember the name of it. But I'm trying to think of who it was that played Robert Jackson, Justice Jackson, said it was absolutely, I watched it and it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm sitting there, this is probably the best movie, and I haven't been able to find it since.
Yeah, Nuremberg, and I dissed it when it came out. Very much like this movie Pressure. The acting in it is fantastic, and the dramatization of the events is riveting and interesting. But as a historian, it's hard to watch these movies when you know the truth and you know the real story, and then you see it portrayed, as some of my friends here online know from my reaction to the movie Pressure. It really bothers me, mostly because that's the history the next generations are going to see. Only a very small percentage of people dig into the actual history and evidence and read all the books to know the truth.
It was I had the opportunity to meet Steven Spielberg.
Oh, wow.
And talk with him. And he said, what you got to remember is when you see movies, Hollywood is Hollywood. And that's why I do the movies I do, because I want the reality portrayed. But Hollywood is Hollywood. And all they want to give you is glamour and romance.
Yeah.
And, if you want reality, you've got to have a historian. Well, Spielberg is a historian. I mean, the Shoah Society out with University of Southern California, that's his doing. That's his funding.
And I point out it's possible for Hollywood to do these histories correctly and still be entertaining. I point to anything Spielberg's done, Tom Hanks,
Yep.
his movies. Is there some, what do you call it, poetic license? Yeah, there has to be some compression of characters and timeline and so forth. But anything they do is worth watching as history.
Right.
Not too much else. We just had a few minutes left, and I wanted to, because I think this last part is also fascinating, because Judgment at Nuremberg, the movie, 1961, but it then goes on to be a Broadway play in 2001. But Harry, it doesn't have a very long run. Why?
No. March 25th to May 13th of 2001. Had a total of 56 performances. And it all comes down to portrayal. Again, you see a movie, the actors can be fantastic actors. The acting can be great. But if the approach isn't there, the vision's not there, they're not adequately portrayed. And that's exactly what happened here. The critics basically said it was the worst play they've ever seen. But yet you take a look, and for those of us that are old enough to remember some of these actors, it was George Grizzard, was Judge Haywood. Maximilian Schell in this one played Ernst Janning. Robert Foxworth was Colonel Lawson. It was Colonel Parker in the play. At that play, Michael Hayden, a name that's well known, portrayed Rolf. And the others I'd never heard of.
Yeah. But then the movie, and this is where you get involved over the last couple of decades, goes on to be a hit in sort of the community theater world.
Exactly.
And the original movie was very controversial when it came out. The play on Broadway doesn't do well, but now this seems to be well accepted. What has changed, Harry? Why is it more accepted now than it was decades ago?
I think because people, when I directed the play and when I was in the play and our director, we read and read and read Abby Mann's script. And within the script, if you read a script, you can tell what the vision is for the author. And he stayed by the vision. And my actors, we discussed, I do character representations. Tell me who your character is. Where'd they go to school? Where were they born? Who are their best friends? And the actors can fictionalize it. But what I want to do as a director, and most directors that want to take something like this and make it as historically relevant as possible, but yet riveting to the audience, they want the actors to be able to really relate to each other. And when you're doing a play, you don't have the luxury you have of doing a movie. You don't have cue cards sitting up there. If you make a mistake, your other actors have got to cover for you, or you've got to recover yourself. You've got to realistically interact with each other, and they've got to respect the vision of the author or the playwright. And that's why I think it's being accepted now more and more. I've been asked in the last 3 months by about 7 or 8 different theaters when I'm planning to reprise Judgment at Nuremberg. I'm taking a look, do I really want to do it? Because I had the right people in place at that time. And I've had a lot of my original cast say, hey, I'll come back and do it again. No worries. But my set designer, which is a lot of part of it too, he turned around and I said, I just want a minimal stage. And he says, not for this play. You're not going to get a minimal setting. I walked in because he would not let me see it until he was complete and it was on stage. He did a replica of the Nuremberg courtroom.
Oh, wow.
And the actors felt when they were there in that courtroom that they were in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And the audience felt they were in the courtroom from the tapestries and everything else. So it's just now it's how much you want to put into it because you want the audience to believe they're there.
But do you think, and then we'll stop and let others ask questions. Do you think that somehow in the last couple of decades, the general public, and I guess I have to limit this to the American general public because it's really the only one I can relate to or understand even a little bit, is just more accepting of the fact that the Holocaust took place, that the Nuremberg trials took place, that the memories of all that need to be kept alive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's not just the American public. I had mentioned to you the other day with Shoah that it just finished a run in Nuremberg, Germany with audiences that were, it was full house audiences.
Yeah. What's the okay, never mind. I'll stop there and ask, are there questions that the audience would like to pose to Harry or any discussion here in the last few minutes that we have?
I opened up the gallery view, so anybody raising their hand or waving their hand. Justin, you had a question earlier, but we missed you because it dozed off just a touch. Justin Miller, did you still have that question, yes or no? I'll ask you to unmute, Justin. You had your coffee, so.
No, I sort of agree. I've seen both, or I've seen 3 different Nuremberg renditions as movies, and I think the one you were talking about that was made for TV movie, I think I saw that about 9 years ago. I stumbled on it somewhere. I followed it a little bit mostly because I had 2 uncles that were both lawyers and were involved in the backside of the Nuremberg trials in 4 or 5 of them. Before they passed away, they would comment on what they felt about the issues and discuss what they were having to do to go find the answers. My Uncle Wellington, who was really an oil and gas guy before the war and after the war, he said the hardest thing was interviewing just residents of either Germany, Czechoslovakia, or Poland who were in the camps in one form or another. And he said that was the hardest thing he ever had to do.
Thank you, Justin. Let me ask a question of Doug Servey. Doug, you're obviously an accomplished Holocaust scholar. What do you think of the movie, The Judgment at Nuremberg, and its reception by the general public back then and now?
I would say, based on the students that I've had, they know very little about the trials. Some of them actually have gone to see the new film. And needless to say, I said, if you thought that was film, and as Harry has mentioned about the actors and so forth and their portrayals, But I says, go see Judgment in Nuremberg. It's in black and white. It's 1961. Then come back and ask, and we'll discuss that in class. And unfortunately, I never have enough time to do all of that. But some of them do go back on their own because they really want to know what the culpability was. Because I spend a significant amount of time on how do you get people to commit these atrocities. And I'm reading a fabulous book right now that I suggest everybody may want to get called The Nazi Mind. And I think the British historian is Lawrence Dees, possibly.
Yep.
And that's shocking. It's almost like I'm reading something from 1938, 39. And here we are in 2026.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The one other thing that I would bring up, which I put in the chat, which people may not know, is that David Wilkinson, who's a historian, documentarian in England, did a really good 3-part series on the perpetrators. How many perpetrators were there? And they have documentation on about 750,000 people in Germany, and about 1% out of that 1 million were ever put on trial.
Wow. Wow.
Which I found that shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. So one last point I'd make and ask Harry and Doug what they think of this. So I think about the movie, the Judgment at Nuremberg movie, even the Nuremberg movie that just came out, go back to these moral questions that are posed by these movies. Do they really answer any of the moral questions? Is it just all left like those are the questions, but not sure anybody has a definitive answer?
I know that, and again, talking with Aaron Cohen, Man's stepson today, Man meant for the audience to figure this out. The questions were, they were there. Nobody ever came out straight out and asked the question.
Yeah.
But the questions were implicated throughout the movie and the play.
Yeah.
Let the audience determine what these questions are and what the answers are to those questions. Because in the long run, we're trying to educate the audience.
Doug, any thought on that?
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's what I throw that back in the students' lap every chance I get. What would you do in that situation? And obviously, none of us know. But now you have this information, and if a situation arises, your obligation is to step up and do the right thing because these people obviously did not do that. And that becomes a judgment on, just opening the door at Wawa, let somebody in to be nice.
Yep.
I mean, one of the things that David Wishner, which we'll get to next week, is that make this a better place than it was before you came.
Yeah, that's I think, one of the central thoughts of humankind, if you will. Well, look, we're a little bit over the time frame. We need to stop. If you haven't seen the movie Judgment at Nuremberg, you can go watch it on YouTube, not YouTube TV, actual YouTube for free. There's no cost. And if you're a fan of Star Trek, like I am, you will see one very, very young, and my wife would say incredibly handsome, William Shatner in the Judgment at Nuremberg.
In a minor role as the captain.
Yeah, sort of an aide to the judge, as I recall. Yeah. And it's just fascinating because 2 or 3 years later, he's playing Captain Kirk.
That's it.
Yeah. But Harry, thank you so very much for being on and taking us through this.
Cool.
Doug, thank you for your contributions. I don't know if Richard Inlow is on, the World War II veteran. Thank you for joining us. Sean, any last minute shout outs?
No, I just want to appreciate everybody showing up, being here. Barb, great to see you. Thank you all. We'll see you Monday night for our conversation with Mark Hertling.
And next Thursday with Doug Servey again. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Night.